This is what racism looks like in the year 2015. Recently, there was a media story in Breitbart.com, which, regardless how you feel about it, in most cases tells stories that you're not going to hear in the mainstream media, such as MSNBC or CNN. In fact, some of the things that they mention you probably wouldn't even hear about in Fox News. But they titled it the liberal media lynching of Dr. Ben Carson. Now, first of all, regardless how you feel about him, Dr. Ben Carson's accomplishments are fact. The title in front of his name, where it actually says doctor, unlike many of these quote-unquote intellectuals that you see on the Bill Maher show and MSNBC, like Melissa Harris Perry, who doesn't even have a real doctorate degree. She has an honorary doctorate from a theological seminary. But anyway, the word doctor in front of Ben Carson's name actually means something. Dr. Ben Carson was a professor of neurosurgery, oncology, plastic surgery, and pediatrics. He was also a director of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital. And at age 33, he became the youngest major division director in the hospital's history. And he was director of pediatric neurosurgery. So obviously he was doing basically brain and nerve surgery on babies. He was also a co-director of the Johns Hopkins Craniofacial Center. So, they rebuild your skull if they have to cut your head open so they get there into your brain so they can work on it. Well, basics. But anyway, what kills me about Dr. Ben Carson is the fact that he openly talks about the fact that he's a Christian, and a lot of the things that he said, like the 10% rule that he brought up at the first Republican debate, I actually thought that was kind of funny. But he brought up the 10% rule because he was saying only 10% of your money should be taxed. So basically what he was talking about was a flat tax, so that if I make $100,000, I only get 10% taken out. But if I make $1 billion, I get 10% of $1 billion taken out. So he's talking about a flat tax. Let me let you in on a little secret. First of all, there's going to be no fair taxes. There's going to be no flat taxes. The government has no interest in letting any of us know what the other person is actually being taxed. Furthermore, we have a spending problem. We don't have a taxation problem. We have a spending problem. We're spending $50,000 per second, which is why you're getting these $1 trillion deficits, and the national debt is now $19 trillion. So there's going to be no flat taxes. There's going to be no fair taxes. President Trump's tax plan, that's a non-issue. It's not going to happen. We are spending so much money that even with our interest rates at zero, the Fed can't raise interest rates, because if they do, it'll put the government into recession, simply because we wouldn't even be able to service the interest on the national debt if the interest rates are any higher than zero. So Dr. Ben Carson's little 10% rule, that was never going to happen. But anyway, this media story about him, a lot of people have been attacking him. And the funny thing about it is the people who've been attacking him have been mostly the talking head, mindless liberals over at MSNBC and CNN. Fox News hasn't really attacked him. In fact, when he goes to those GOP debates, they rarely ask him questions about foreign policy. They target, Donald Trump, and they target Jeb Bush, but they don't target Ben Carson. And that's something he brought up. But I know it's talking about we are all witnessing an elaborate media liberal lynching of Dr. Ben Carson, former Johns Hopkins neurosurgeon. What kills me is the fact that I thought that the Democratic Party was supposed to represent black people. I thought the Democratic Party was supposed to represent the interests of minorities. I thought the Democratic Party was interested in taking black males like myself and uplifting us to the point where we could be professional workers in the society. That's what I thought. Then again, now you get somebody like this who comes along, and just because he's on the other side of the issue, similar to people like Michael Steele and Herman Cain, which are, for regardless how you feel about it, they're all successful businessmen. I find it interesting that the Democratic Party has no interest in these people. And I find it interesting that the black males who are the most upright and the most successful, those are the ones that I see on MSNBC being mocked by Rachel Harry Potter Maddow and by all of the people there, such as Chris Tingles Matthews and the other. I haven't watched MSNBC in a long time, but I constantly hear the remarks being brought up. They're being torn down by liberal media. And the sad thing is, the blacks who mindlessly watch this shit are quick to call Dr. Ben Carson a coon. You see that word right there? Yeah. They're quick to call Dr. Carson a coon, and they're also quick to call him a tap dancer for the white man. But despite his accomplishments, which he did fairly, legally, and I mean, first of all, a neurosurgeon, not many people become neurosurgeons. I mean, you're talking about a neurosurgeon is like the top 5% of all medical professionals that have ever existed in the history of man. And yet when a black male gets to this point, he's torn down by what was supposed to be an assistant to the NAACP to take black males and uplift them. I find that very odd. I find that to be hypocrisy. So here's my question. Maybe Dr. Ben Carson would get more attention, and maybe he'd get more uplifting if he was out robbing stores and shot dead by a white cop.